In this very special episode, I'd like to introduce you to Diane Porterfield Bourne. Now, Diane has been nursing for 34 years, and she's actually a menopause nurse specialist and an independent nurse prescriber. She's also CQC registered. And Diane, as you're going to experience in today's episode, has extensive training with the British Menopause Society, Newson Health, and she's constantly studying and updating her skills. And in today's episode, you're going to see some of that information as well. She's up to date with all the information. And so Diane also provides online consultations supporting women that are going through menopause. And she runs clinics in the UK, so in areas such as Worcestershire, the West Midlands and Shropshire. And she provides support for employees and managers within business, and that also includes the NHS. Now, Diane's also appeared on the ITV. She's appeared on Channel 5 News and lots of different radio and newspaper articles. You can find her there too. And Diane's also written and delivered lots of menopause programs within the NHS. So this is going to be a really action-packed episode, and I can't wait to share it with you. So are you ready? Let's get started. Hello and welcome to the Somatic Movement and Mindset podcast with me, clinical somatic educator and founder of Total Somatics, Heidi Hadley. The Somatic Movement and Mindset podcast has been designed to help you gain a deeper understanding to how your mind and body work. You will learn about your amazing mind and body and why over time you can feel pain, recurring injuries and poor posture. Within this podcast, I will teach you why this doesn't have to be your future or the norm for you. Would you like to learn how to reduce pain, move freely, and gain a new lease of life? Let's get started. So welcome back to this very special episode. And as you can see from that bio, Diane has just got a field of knowledge and expertise that we're going to be just delving into today. And what I'd like to first of all do is say a humongous thank you, Diane, because we've just finished a workshop with not only the Total Somatics members, but for this special episode, Total Somatics members invited any of their family and friends that they wanted to come in just to get a little bit more information as well, because it's such an important subject. So what I'd love to do, Diane, is just bring you in, welcome you, and then can you tell us a little bit more about how you came into this really rewarding area of health?
I've been involved with menopause care for about 5 years now, and it started when I met a lady when I was swimming who asked me if I know anything about menopause, and I said I know a little bit but not a lot, and she told me how she was struggling with her menopausal symptoms. And so I said, well, I'll meet you here at the baths next week and I'll find out for you, thinking that, of course, there's lots of help available. And when I did some digging and diving, I realised that there was virtually no advice, no information and no support. And it was from that point I realised that this was a massive area that all women were going to be struggling in. And that's how it all started. And that was the turning point, really. And that's been about 5 years now. So, and, you know, things have improved, but we still got a long way to go.
Yeah, and it was really interesting because when you were talking in the workshop, you were mentioning about all the different symptoms that people can have. And they can sometimes blame it on or think it's to do with a life experience or a different part of their life. But you brought in how it actually weaves back into like the menopause aspect. And I suppose that's what people don't always realize, do they, is how much it's all connected.
They've no idea. And I think it's when people talk to people like myself that I focus on the menopause. And because I'm a nurse professional, I know how to do consultations. So it's about pulling information out of people and working out what we think the main problem is. And that was the one thing I realised when I was still working in like a GP service, that people were coming in with lots of different symptoms with menopause, but they didn't know that's what it was. And I was thinking, well, that's menopause related and that's menopause related and all that's going to be the menopause, but they didn't identify that. And so over the years, I now know that there's so much more to it. So all these minor things that you might think, oh, you know, your hair's got really dry, you've got dry eyes, you've got dental problems, sore mouth, sore gums, you've got dry, itchy skin, you can't sleep very well, you're struggling to remember facts. You forgot where you parked your car, you put keys in the fridge and not in, or in the oven, instead of putting them in your handbag. And it's all these funny little things that you might think, oh, it's just because my mind was preoccupied. It was just because I was doing this at the same time. But it's when you think about it realistically, you start to say, do you have any other menopausal symptoms? And I start to list them and go, oh yeah, I've got that, but I thought it's because of this, this and this. So I then say, well, let's look at menopause in a bit more detail. And that's when we work out that people do have menopausal symptoms, but they just haven't identified it.
And I really liked how you mentioned in the workshop how it's to embrace this period of our life and talk about it and kind of break a lot of those myths, or because one of the factors that came out on quite a number of occasions in that workshop, and I'm sure people listening to this episode might also agree, is the fear around, say, HRT and breast cancer. That came out a lot, didn't it? And you covered it so well. But is it okay to share a little bit about that with the listener here?
Yes, absolutely. Again, there's a lot of fear associated with HRT and menopause and breast cancer. And this started about 20 years ago when some reports were published that were publicised earlier than they should have been. They were leaked to the press, they went worldwide, and suddenly everybody found a connection between breast cancer and HRT. But we've now pulled upon this research, we've literally stripped it apart. And other than knowing that a lot of the information that was portrayed about the HRT link was not correct, we've actually pulled out some really interesting information that helps us improve people's experiences going through the menopause and reduce your risks by taking HRT. So it's really about getting the right message across. As I said on the presentation earlier, it's about individualized care. Everybody experiences menopause differently, has different symptoms, has different health needs, and different perceptions of what your fears are. And so really it's getting down to the personal approach of how menopause and HRT can transform your life if that's what you want to do.
And that's the thing about that perspective, because I don't know if you've still got that data next to you, but I was scribbling down at the time when you mentioned a few statistics about what was it? Well, I don't want to ruin it for you. So if you remember where you talked about out of 1,000 women. So I just thought, is that possible to bring that to perspective when we're considering the lifestyle factor as well?
Yeah. I actually don't go anywhere without this. It's from the British Menopause Society, and we just call it the breast cancer pictogram. But basically it's called Understanding the Risks of Breast Cancer. And it's saying that 23 out of 1,000 women will experience breast cancer regardless. That's the numbers of women that will get breast cancer every year. By women that take combined hormone replacement therapy, so that's estrogen and progesterone, there'll be an additional 4 extra cases of breast cancer because they take HRT. But for fewer cases of women that actually take estrogen only HRT. So by taking the estrogen only HRT, as in you've got no womb, you don't need the progesterone part of it, it actually reduces your risks of developing a lot of the health issues associated with HRT. But what we have to put into perspective is about the lifestyle elements of it. So women's greatest fear is getting breast cancer from taking HRT. Well, actually drinking 2 or more drinks of alcohol a day can increase your chances of getting breast cancer compared to HRT. So that's something that women will not think about. And then being overweight increases your risks by developing breast cancer by huge amounts. It virtually doubles the amount of women that will get breast cancer. So these are the lifestyle modifications that we are in control of. We can do something about this. It's not easy, I'm not saying it will be, but we can reduce our drinking, we can stop smoking, we can take more exercise. Because exercise, I thought, was a brilliant one here. We know that being overweight virtually doubles your risks of breast cancer, but actually exercise, so 2.5 hours of moderate exercise a week, reduces your risks of getting breast cancer compared to the standard population. So if we think those 23 out of 1,000 people will get breast cancer in the year, 7 fewer women will get breast cancer because they exercise for 2.5 hours a week. So lifestyle, although as health professionals think, oh, we're banging on about lifestyle again, do this, do that. This is why we do, because it is so important. If you get the basics right, you're really going to make a huge difference to your overall quality of life and reduce your risk factors for everything.
And I think what ties in with that, and I think if this is correct, when I wrote this down from what you said, is that due to that lack of estrogen, it creates osteoporosis. And in women over the age of 50, is that right, that 1 in 2 will have osteoporosis? So we were talking in the group, weren't we, about, sorry.
Yeah. So it can get a fracture.
Fracture.
You can get a fracture, yeah. And obviously we have to start to think, if you're over 50 and you've developed a fracture, the big question is, what's going on? You know, if it was a horrendous fall that you've had, okay, fair enough. But even from quite mild falls, women are fracturing bones, even just wearing shoes and going for a walk, they're fracturing bones in their feet. Why? Why is the question. Then you start to think, okay, well, what's going on with your bones? The reason that you've had a very minor fall, that you've broken a bone because you shouldn't do. So what is it? So lifestyle, poor diet and lack of HRT, as well as medications, lifestyle, family history. So everything ties into it. It's all about making the little changes that make a huge difference. So HRT is quite a big element of that, a big chunk of what we can do to prevent these long-term health risk factors.
Absolutely. And I wanted to mention that I scribbled down here a note, because when we think of the menopause, people just think menopause. But I thought it was quite interesting because, of course, you people just don't realize until we really get into the nitty gritty of it. But you mentioned there's like the medically induced menopause, like from chemo, that sort of thing, the surgically induced. So can you tell us a little bit about those different ones, how that all happens and the approaches that can be taken as well, if that's possible?
Obviously, the different types of menopause. So most women will go through the natural menopause. So that's a natural, gentle decline of your female hormones, which can be problematic enough for most of us. But if you've had medically induced, so you've got medications that are predominantly inducing menopausal symptoms by sort of blocking your estrogen, so that estrogen isn't passed into the cell. So it's actually blocking it at source. So therefore, we've said that the reasons that you get menopausal symptoms is a lack of estrogen. If you're taking medication to block estrogen from entering your cell for a health reason, then no estrogen is going in. So you're taking estrogen blocking medication. There are other things as well, but that's probably one of the main ones that will induce menopausal symptoms. Surgical menopause. So again, if you've had your ovaries removed from surgery, then you've got no ovaries. So your ovaries are really, I mean, other than the adrenal glands, which produce tiny amounts of hormones, everything comes from the your ovaries. So you've got no ovaries, so you've got no female hormones. And so, as I said before, some women, it can be like falling off a cliff. One day you feel fine because you've got good levels of female hormones. The next day you've got nothing and you can hit the ground hard. And then because of the lack of female hormones, you just can't get yourself up off the floor. And it can be life-changing, really, really life-changing. And I think the one thing we don't want to brush over is the fact how it impacts upon your mental well-being. Suicide is highest amongst menopausal women. And we need to ask why. Why? It's because it's menopause. And without being able to talk and get the right medical advice and the right support, women are suffering in silence. And particularly people from ethnic minorities as well. It might not be the norm to discuss menopause, to talk about your feelings, to talk about how your hormonal symptoms are impacting upon you. It's something that you just get on with, and it's just not discussed. And so it's being aware of how it will impact everybody and what we can do to reach to people, either giving people literature, speaking to people about it, and people with disabilities as well, autism, ADHD, really struggling with their menopausal symptoms. You know, coping day to day can be difficult, but when you throw menopause into the mix, it really, really causes significant psychological problems. And again, we're talking about reducing risks of suicide and significant mental health. And HRT, talking to people, support with friends, support within the workplace can make a huge difference, because menopause is a really lonely place. And if you've got mental health problems as well, or learning disabilities as well as this, you can see how this would impact upon you.
Yeah, because it's interesting you mentioned that. When you were going through the workshop, you were mentioning about all the different psychological effects and brain fog, the whole concentration. But I liked how you said, don't make any rash life decisions or resign from a job. Because when you mentioned that, it triggered a thought of somebody here in the clinic. We were chatting once about menopause, and she was saying the same, is that it's such an important area that needs to be discussed, because people, women are leaving their jobs, aren't they? And they've got all this experience that if they just had that support, and not only just are they leaving their jobs, but it's affecting their self-worth, isn't it? So when they don't have that identity anymore, so it's kind of bringing that to the fore, knowing that, as you said, get attended to, and then see how things change, and don't make those rash decisions.
That's right. Wait till your brain's working better. You're thinking logically. Then whatever decision you make will be right for you. Whether you're going to leave that job anyway, that's fine. But make sure you're doing it with your hormones sorted and you're in a better frame of mind. Because I speak to a lot of women that have made that decision to quit their jobs. And I actually saw a lady who was a very senior police officer who had taken early retirement because she couldn't cope with work. And she came to see me. She left work about 5 years back, and she'd listened to one of my presentations, and she realised that she'd made that decision, and she said, I've made a big mistake. I wish I hadn't done it, because now I know it was the menopause. I could have easily have dealt with it and I'd still be working now. So this is why I say, don't make any quick decisions. You know, obviously we're all different, you know, it depends on your own situation, but fundamentally, don't make quick decisions. Make yourself feel better. Think logically, talk it through, and that goes with like personal relationships as well as working relationships as well.
That's brilliant. And can I just ask, you know, because obviously it's about getting a really supportive health practitioner, isn't it, to go with you during this whole experience. But you made a really, really interesting point, and that is that during the whole menopausal type, there's symptoms that people get, like thrush, and there's other aspects, and they'll sometimes treat those symptoms, whereas, as you said, it's coming back to the root cause. Are you able to elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, afterwards, if people want to go onto my website, and you can see that my logo is a tree. So I designed this tree because the root cause, so in the roots, you've actually got lack of hormones, lifestyle, medications. The root cause of the problems that we experience are fundamentally there. The leaves on the tree are the symptoms that we display. So vaginal dryness, anxiety, lack of motivation, low libido, all of those are the leaves. That's what we outwardly experience, we outwardly see. But the root cause of the problem, what's causing these problems at the soul of it all, are hormone fluctuations and low levels of hormones through lifestyle, through medications, through family history, or our own female hormones that we just don't have enough of them. So during the menopause, the lack of estrogen affects the cells in the vagina, the urethra, the bladder, the pelvic floor, everything. All these cells are highly dependent on our female hormones. So when our levels start to fall, these take a real hit. And we've got different levels of cells in these, like in the vagina and the vulva, everywhere. We've got the superficial cells, which are the top, and these superficial cells are really dependent on estrogen. And so that's what produces mucus, good blood supply. So when we're having sex, it doesn't hurt. We don't get urinary tract infection symptoms because we've got lots and lots of lovely estrogen, and everything looks and feels normal. So during the menopause, estrogen levels start to fall. So not everybody experiences vaginal dryness and soreness and irritation and painful sex, but a lot of women do. And so as those female levels start to fall, the lack of estrogen affects those cells. So yeah, it's the superficial cells that are dependent on the estrogen. So instead of them being really voluminous and lots of lovely cells, they sort of shrink down to like basically just a covering. They've got no blood supply, or very, very little blood supply. They can be pale, itchy, dry, they can bleed, and not producing any mucus. So sex is nigh impossible for most women. So when you then start thinking, okay, well, what is the root cause of why I've got these vaginal symptoms? Why am I getting urinary tract infection symptoms? Why am I got this itch there? The fact is that predominantly it's going to be due to lack of estrogen until otherwise proved. So lack of estrogen affects the pH balance in the vagina and all these cells there. So the pH of the vagina likes to be very acidic. So when we have lack of estrogen during the menopause, it changes the pH. The pH starts to become more alkaline. So as we start to go up on the pH scale, it alters everything. So all our lovely natural bacteria that we have there are killed off because it's more alkaline rather than acidic. So as our normal bacteria are disappearing, we then develop these other symptoms of dryness and thrush-like symptoms, itchiness. So then you buy over-the-counter stuff to treat it. You know, I've got this dryness and this itch, or you might get some lubrications and things like that to have sex, which in fact could actually be making the whole thing worse. And so the pH is increasingly going up, so it's becoming more alkaline because of the treatments that you're doing. But nothing seems to be getting to the problem. You've still got this dryness and this itch and this soreness and urinary tract infections. You might be having antibiotics, which just makes it all worse. So the root cause of it, what is going on? It's menopause. It's lack of hormones. So what we need to do is thinking, what do we need to treat it with? And that's hormones. So it's estrogen. So you can have systemic estrogen, systemic HRT, your patches and your gels that will have an overall effect on your body. But for some people, they've got mainly focusing on these areas that are the worst. Then you can have vaginal estrogens as well. So you have vaginal estrogens then that would like get your pH back to being acidic. So as it starts to shift back down the pH scale and your vagina starts to become more acidic because it's more estrogenized again, that lovely estrogen is feeding those superficial cells that were really narrow suddenly start to grow again, producing mucus and blood cells, and things start to look and feel more normal again. And vaginal estrogens are something that you take alongside traditional HRT, so your patches, gels and sprays, and you can take it long term. And vaginal estrogens isn't something we really advise you to stop. It's something that's more long term, because as soon as you stop, those superficial cells are going to go back down again and not produce blood supply and mucus and things like that.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing. Really, really helpful, that is, for information. Just regarding the hormones as a whole, you mentioned there were like 3 distinct hormones that fluctuate with the menopause, and we've obviously mentioned estrogen. Is it possible to mention the other 2, if that's okay?
Yeah, obviously, you know, estrogen and progesterone are more to do with our menstrual cycles and things like that. And we don't, in the UK, we don't focus too much on the progesterone part of HRT, other than the fact that you need it if you have a womb and it protects the lining of your womb. So if you just take estrogen, for example, say you had a womb and you were just taking estrogen, the lining of your womb would get thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker, which cancerous cells can start to grow. So we never ever prescribe estrogen. We call it unopposed. We just never give you estrogen alone if you have a womb. When you take progesterone, it keeps the lining of the womb nice and narrow. So you have estrogen, it makes it get thicker. You have progesterone that keeps it nice and narrow. You can't have one without the other. That's it. So estrogen helps with more of the effects of the menopause. The progesterone helps keep things in check. Testosterone is the other important female hormone that people don't think women produce or need. And testosterone is really important. Not everybody needs it, not everybody wants it. So we always check blood levels beforehand. But if your levels are lower and you are symptomatic, such as low sexual desire, low libido, then we can easily prescribe you testosterone replacement. And as I said on the show earlier, is the fact that I actually prescribe a female testosterone that's available, that comes from Western Australia, and I can prescribe it in the UK because there is no other product in the world that does this, and certainly not available in the United Kingdom. So I can prescribe it on a special license, and I prescribe it a lot. And it's really common, very popular, and it really, really helps women. And that's a female testosterone. There's lots of male testosterone prescriptions out there as well, and medications that are available on the NHS and are available, but they're male testosterone, so they're not body identical to us, which, you know, lots of women take them and are absolutely fine with it, but I give people the choice. I can prescribe both. And so testosterone can have a significant impact on your quality of life. So it helps with libido, sexual desire, But the other things that people reportedly tell me, and this is often, it helps with brain fog, it helps with muscular aches and pains, it helps improve sleep. But the most important one is that it gives people their mojo back again. They feel better on it. They think, whoa, I've come alive again. This is how I used to feel when I was 30. I've got my va-va-vum back again. I've got my spark again. I feel I can handle life again. I feel alive. And that's what testosterone can do. So like I said, not everybody wants it and not everybody needs it. But for those people that clearly do, we can support them with testosterone replacement as well.
I think that's so heartening to hear that, because when people are starting to go through the menopause, they start thinking, is this it then? You know, and they start wondering about their performance with work and their focus, and if they can still deliver at the level that they've done before. So when you hear how those with the testosterone, how that really just bumps everything up. Can I just ask a question, because you did mention it, and I when you mentioned it in the workshop, it just triggered me, is that a lot of women have told me how they've had the Mirena coil and they've kept that going, and that kind of just helped them go through the menopause as well. And you did mention that. So is that something that's often quite common, just as a supportive measure?
Well, the Mirena just gives you progesterone. It doesn't give you estrogen. And most of the symptoms that women experience are due to lack of estrogen rather than anything else. I said in the UK, we prescribe progesterone for either as a contraception, as in like the mini pill, but for HRT, we only prescribe the progesterone to prevent the lining of your womb getting thick. So a Mirena will be there for contraception, that's a synthetic progesterone, that stays there 4 to 5 years. So you would have the that can be used for HRT purposes in the Mirena coil, but you will need estrogen as well. So if you've got no menopausal symptoms, then okay, but I'd be asking to think very seriously about, do you really have any menopausal symptoms or not? Because as I've said, most women do, but they'll put it down to other things because they might be quite subtle. If they're quite subtle, you're certainly not going to need huge amounts of HRT. But it's just something to think, okay, well, if your sleep's affected, your quality of life isn't quite as it should be, just not feeling yourself a bit deflated, a bit lacking in motivation, a bit yuck, then what can we do to improve that? And it might be when you think, well, I do get a few hot flushes. I do wake up at night feeling a bit sweaty, but it's only once a week and it's okay. And yeah, I do get up to go to the loo a couple of times in the night now, but that's okay, you know, that's all right. But again, when you start to talk to people about it, say, well, that's part of the menopause. You know, did you have that when you were 20? Well, no, of course I didn't. So when you actually put it like that, I think, well, what's changed? Well, nothing's changed, but the menopause is here now. You've got menopausal symptoms. And so I think, oh, I didn't know that. So again, it's joining the dots together, really, of what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. The thing is, Diane, I think we could talk all day because there's so many questions, and I bet people are listening on that side of things. But what I'd love to do is just give this opportunity that if people do have any questions or they want to reach out to you, obviously I'm going to put all the details in the show notes for this episode. But do you want to just let us know a bit more about what you do and how they can get hold of you?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm based in Worcestershire in the UK. I have face-to-face clinics in Worcestershire and in the West Midlands area, but virtually all my work, I do consultations online. So it doesn't matter where you are in the UK, I can do an online consultation with you, and I can prescribe you HRT remotely as well. Most HRT I prescribe is basically, it arrives the following day. I can manage you, I can support you either as a one-off or long-term. With your consent, I write to your GP. I organise blood tests and I review blood tests. So it's about reaching out to people to say that I can support you in any aspect of your menopause, whether it's just a chat that you want about menopause, whether it's a full consultation, whether you'd like to be prescribed medications, whether you're on HRT from your GP and you're thinking it's not helping me. That's really common. I help sort that out for you. So by getting in touch with me, and all my details will be on there. So it's borntocare.co.uk. You can do the contact me page or in the inquiries at borntocare.co.uk and drop me a message and just say, hello, Diane, I'd like some information about a menopause consultation. Or if you need some advice or support within your workplace, I do lots of training, no matter where you are in the world, so I can provide that training for you as well. Remotely,
Brilliant.
of course.
And I just want to clarify the Bourne to Care, the Bourne is Bourne, Bourne.
That's right.
So just in case, yeah. So Bourne to Care, brilliant. But what I'll do, Diane, is make sure that everything's in the show notes so they can get hold of you, they can find your website, they can email you, they can find all sorts of things that way. So if you're driving along and you're listening to this, don't worry, just look below this episode and you'll find all the details there. So just as we finish this episode, Diane, is there any closing comments or thoughts that you'd like to share with everybody as we finish this episode?
Yeah, just to say that don't suffer your symptoms of menopause. The earlier you start HRT, the better it's going to be for you and your long-term health. Don't listen to hearsay, listen to fact. Speak to health professionals that understand menopause. Nurses, doctors are ideally placed to support you. And we've got lots of evidence-based advice. So it's getting the right advice from the right person. And don't listen to some things that you read. Get the evidence and make your own decision what's right for you.
Absolutely brilliant. So thank you so much, Diane, and thank you everybody for listening today. Please let me know what you think of this episode. As I said, reach out to Diane. You can also find her on Facebook. And what's your tag on Facebook?
Facebook.com/Bourne to Care.
Wonderful, fantastic. And again, everyone, Bourne, Bourne. So that's sort of Bourne. Wonderful. So we're going to love you and leave you. And thank you for joining us for this episode. And until next time, all my love and best wishes to you all. Take care. Bye. Thank you for joining me today. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and also forward this on to somebody you know will benefit. To learn more about pain relief, plus how to improve your health and well-being, go to totalsomatics.com. Until next time, take care.